So I'm going to go through my 5 favorite things of the 2023 season. This is the non-Shohei Ohtani division. I believe he's kind of all of our favorites, and we'll get to him later. But these are the 5 things that kind of stood out to me this year more than anything. And we'll start with number 5. Some would have this at number 1, and I can understand that, but it's the pitch clock. The pitch clock that made our game watchable again. For so many years, it had been dragging and taking forever, and a lot of people were just getting bored and kind of wondering if baseball was ever going to snap out of it. Well, let's take a look at some numbers from the past season, and it'll show you just how dramatically the clock impacted the game, and not just the time of game, which of course is the big thing, but also the pace of the game. All right, you see it here. The average time of a 9-inning Major League game dropped to 2 hours, 40 minutes in the first year of the pitch clock. That was a 24-minute decrease, putting the average time of game at its lowest since 1985. That alone was cause for celebration among a lot of people. But again, it was more than that. It was the pace. It was the ability to watch games again flow. And that hadn't been the case in many years. And I have a friend who used to be a baseball writer and now is doing some other things in journalism. And he said this year, for the first time in a long time, he actually enjoyed watching baseball again. A lot of people seem to feel the same way. And to show you vividly just what a decline in the time of game it was, take a look at this. Essentially, we're going from 3 hours, 4 minutes in 2022 to 2 hours, 40 minutes in 2023. And on this graph, it basically looks like the time of game is falling off a cliff. It did. Thank goodness there are some more adjustments being made for 2024, but I expect that the pace is going to continue to be good and the times of games will continue to be good as well. Pitch clock, number 5 on my list of favorite things. Number 4, this is a guy who was the MVP of the National League this year, and he did some remarkable things. I'm talking, of course, about Ronald Acuna Jr. What an amazing season he had. We can go through the numbers, and we will right here. Just showing you what Acuna did. It's worth repeating again who this guy was for the Atlanta Braves last season. Batting average, 337. On base, 416. Slug, 596. And, of course, 73 stolen bases to lead the majors. You might say, yeah, the rules helped juice that total. Maybe so, but he led the majors by a pretty good margin. Also led the majors in runs, hits, and on-base percentage. Now, what I liked about Acuna beyond what he did on the field was the things I heard from Braves people about how he was off the field. And the year before, when he was still coming off his injury, it was his first full season since, he still wasn't right. He still wasn't right physically, and it seems that he wasn't right mentally. He was a little bit down because he couldn't be himself. This year, he was, of course, back to Ronald Acuna Jr., and you didn't hear anymore that he's a little bit of a problem, he's this, he's down, he's sulking. No. You heard he was a good teammate. You heard he was doing great things. He played in 159 games. Like all the Braves, he seems to want to play every day. So Acuna, he could easily be a Dude of the Year candidate, but of course he's the National League MVP, and he's good enough for number 4 on my list of favorite things. Just the way he came out of it, both on the field and I guess off the field, you would say as well, lifting his own spirits with his play and getting back to who he was and who he could be. Number 3 on this list, well, this is an interesting one. It's kind of one that's closer to my heart because I worked in Baltimore for so many years, and it's the Orioles' resurgence. Now, granted, the Orioles tanked, and they tanked in a big way. And really, after a while, they had nowhere to go but up. But in the last 2 years, they've gone up in a big way. And what's most heartwarming about all this, I don't root for any one team, but obviously I have a lot of affection for Baltimore, having worked there for so many years. I was there from 1987 to 2009 in one capacity or another. I lived there. My family basically was started there. So Baltimore was always, in my mind, a baseball town that was kind of the equivalent of St. Louis. It was the East Coast St. Louis. And when I say that, I'm talking about the passion of the fans, the loyalty, really the upbeat nature as well. And when you look at their records year by year, the last 5 years, you can see how far they've come. This team under Brandon Hyde and Mike Elias, they've done some great things. Now, 18, 19, and 21. I'm not including 2020 here. It was a shortened season. Those were horrible years. Horrible. And listen, none of us is a fan of tanking. That's what the Orioles did. They were upfront about it. They were not hiding anything. They just went all the way back and then made some great moves, and most of them not that big. A lot of waiver claims, minor league free agents, all kinds of things along those lines. 2022 was a step forward, 83 and 79, and then 23 this year, the 101 wins, one of their best seasons in a long time. And of course, they got upset in the playoffs by the Rangers. Actually, it might not have been an upset considering the Rangers went on to win the World Series. But that was a disappointing end for them, getting swept like that in the division series. No matter. Adley Rutschman, Gunnar Henderson, Santander, all of the guys they have and all of the players who are coming make them a team to watch, not, of course, just in 2024, but in all the years to come. Great job by the Orioles. Good to see Baltimore alive again. My number 2 story or favorite thing, well, this one is similar to the Orioles, but their great accomplishments happen more in the postseason than the regular season. During the regular season, the Diamondbacks were only 84 and 78. No one really took them all that seriously going into the playoffs, but I remember Jason Stark of The Athletic telling me, I sort of like them to upset the Brewers. I thought Jason was nuts, but if you remember, the Brewers lost Woodruff right around that time. It seemed to just deflate them, and credit to the Diamondbacks, they took full advantage. So let's go through the Diamondbacks' postseason run because it was genuinely remarkable. I loved what they did. It was so cool to watch. The Wild Card Series, the 2-game sweep of the Brewers. The Division Series, this was the shocker. The 3-game sweep of the Dodgers. Another great Dodgers team goes down in October. Then the NLCS, the 7-game win over the Phillies. And it wasn't just your basic run-of-the-mill 7-game triumph. The Diamondbacks were down 2-0 in this series. Then they were down 3-2 in this series, going back to Philadelphia, and they won the series. Now, granted, in the World Series, it all kind of faded on them. And when I finally picked them up, I was with the American League with Fox until the World Series. I looked at that middle of the order, Gabriel Moreno, Christian Walker, Tommy Pham, and I thought, those are good players. That's not a World Series triumph middle of the order. And it turned out that it wasn't a World Series triumph middle of the order, but credit to the Diamondbacks. They did some amazing things this year. They've had a good offseason going forward, re-signing Gurriel, signing Eduardo Rodriguez. They're going to be a team to watch. I know they're not the Dodgers. They're not spending $1 billion, but they're going to be quite competitive with some good young players to come. And now, my number 1 favorite thing from this year, and this might surprise people because it really had nothing to do with the regular season or the postseason. My number 1 favorite thing was the World Baseball Classic, which I had the privilege of covering for Fox and The Athletic. I said this at the time, and I'll say it again. That period in March, it was about 2 weeks or so, when the WBC was going on and I was at games every night, that was about the most fun I have ever had covering baseball. I can only compare it to the 1991 World Series, which I remember vividly. Minnesota Twins, Atlanta Braves. That was a closely fought World Series, went 7 games, and I remember the feeling of I couldn't wait to get to the ballpark every day. That's how it was with the WBC. And I can run through all the games and tell you all about all the great things that happened from Great Britain's run. Well, it wasn't really a run, but the shocking upset of Colombia. Then, of course, Puerto Rico's victory over the Dominican Republic the day Edwin Diaz suffered a most unfortunate injury. And then right up to the finals, we had some amazing games in the quarters and semis. And then the ultimate conclusion with Ohtani striking out Trout for Team Japan and Team Japan winning the title. It was a blast every night. There was no pitch clock. The games took however long they took, but it was just a lot of fun. So the WBC was my number 1 favorite thing of 2023. I imagine some of you might say, Ken, you're crazy. There were so many better things that happened. But no, this is my show. That's my number 1 favorite.